Hello, this is Alan Wheeler again. Sorry if there was a long lag there, which sometimes seems to happen at the beginning of my recordings. This is the second video that I'm making in which I ask the tarot cards an abstract question. And this question arose as I was discussing on the Cartomancy forum with a friend this card, the World, and here the Rider-Waite-Smith version. You can see the fifth element is represented by a dancing, levitating, hovering, maybe figure in the middle, and the four other elements are represented by these creatures in the corners. And we have earth and fire and air and water. And here, this card comes at the end of the tarot cycle. And so we were discussing the end of the world and various mythologies and how the card might represent those. So the question that I came to the cards with was, what about these visions of the end of the world? There's the Golden Dawn, who produced the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot, who had a vision of a new age, which is familiar among a lot of spiritual people today. Among Christians, the idea of a second coming. Other versions of utopia, on the other hand, there's nightmarish visions of Armageddon and Ragnarok, when even the Aesir gods are defeated, and other dark visions of the end of the world. So I asked the cards about these, and as I was shuffling, this card fell out, the Tower. Now, I was asking not so much for information, like what will the end be like, but more how to consider these divergent visions. What is their function? How to understand these different ideas? And I came across the familiar poem by Robert Frost, Fire and Ice. I'll read it here. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction ice is also great and would suffice. And to me, that's kind of the modern naturalist vision of the end of the world, with the attending irony and detachment, almost making fun of the more mystical ideas. But I came to the cards hopefully with an open mind, and first, as before, I drew two runes, and these were the runes that I drew. Pertho and Ingwaz. And here's how they spoke to me. Pertho, to some people, it represents mystery and the unknown, something like the blank rune to others. And I think the part of this reason is that the history is uncertain of this rune. Others say it looks like a dice cup and perhaps represents chance or the unknown in the sense of the future being unwritten. So whichever way you look at it, I think that's a good representation of these visions of the end of the world. It remains a mystery, and perhaps things are open to chance and free will. Here is the second rune, Ingwaz, and this is a rune which can mean fertility, like a seed, and to me this speaks of the future. What we reap in the future is sown in the present, so that we can look at what's going on now and what we're doing now as the seeds that bring about the outcome. And whether they're the utopian dreams or the dystopian nightmares, we're actually, we can see the beginnings even now in the choices we make and the actions going on in the present. So these two runes were helpful to me. I then drew 3 tarot cards, and the first one, very appropriately to me, was the High Priestess. And here she sits in front of the veil, and the deep waters are behind her, between the 2 pillars, holding the secret scroll in her hand, the moon at her feet. And as we know, she represents the perhaps the stillness of finding truth deep within and the intuition. And so perhaps she tells us that these myths, these ideas, these visions of the future are perceptions of our deepest truths. And if we are still, if we rest and do not become agitated, maybe we can find within them deep wisdom and understanding. So the next card I drew, and they were 3 major arcana, interestingly, and the second one was the card Strength, and I was reminded of the hymn that we have strength for today and hope for tomorrow, and this card spoke to me that these stories, these visions, sometimes carry us through a difficult time, give us inner strength, and help us make sense when we face uncertainty. Finally, I drew, and of course that seems to me the bright side of these myths, and the third card I drew was the moon. And I read this more as the downside or the darker side, in that the moon can represent imagination gone wild, just as these animals are howling in maybe their instinctual energy there. And the creature is rising up from the water, perhaps to sink down once again. So the reflected light in darkness there. And so to me, this represented the strange unreality of some of these stories. And maybe even if you look at something like the book of Revelation, the strange imagery and uncertain symbolism of those apocalyptic nightmares represented in the moon. Now, I felt like I had more of a grasp of these two cards. They seem to make a lot of sense to ideas I already had. But I drew a clarifying card for the High Priestess from the Mystical Shaman Oracle deck. And I drew the card Lightning as a clarifier for the High Priestess. And looking in the guidebook, I saw that this card can stand for inspiration and enlightenment that comes in a flash of insight, but also it can represent destruction and the shaking up of old ideas. So it can come as a warning, that flash of lightning. And I remembered that the tower had fallen out as I was shuffling earlier, and you can see lightning striking the top of the tower here. And so perhaps this is telling us that the nightmares and the stories like Ragnarok of the end of the age maybe can be a warning or a memento mori, a reminder of the temporary nature of life, not just individual lives, but the state of the world and the cycles that we go through. So those were some of the ways the runes and the cards seem to answer my question, how to consider these divergent visions of the end of the world. I hope that was helpful or enjoyable. Thank you for listening, and take care.